Hello everybody. Today we are going to talk about negative and positive space. And rather than me try to recreate something, I found a great video to show you that talks all about negative and positive space. So let's go ahead and watch that, and then it's also going to have a great description of what the assignment is going to be. The assignment is to draw a stool in negative space, and you'll understand more about what that means in a second. You will probably not be able to draw a stool in negative space in class because you missed the lecture when we were doing it, but you can always set up a stool and take a picture of it, or if you have a stool or a chair or something at your house that might work, you can always do it that way too. But here it is a really good explanation of negative and positive space, as well as the assignment.
For this lesson, we're going to learn a little bit about positive and negative spaces. Maybe you remember the classic faces and vases illusion. If you focus on the vase, the white part, that becomes the positive space, which makes the black part become the negative space, because it looks like it's in the background. Yet, if you focus on the faces, the black space, they become the positive space, which pushes the white vase into the background, making it the negative space. Let's take a look at this tree. In this picture, the tree is very clearly the positive space, and the white space in the background is the negative space. The positive and negative space in this picture is perfectly balanced, creating a nice composition. If we zoom in a little bit more, the black space, the tree, is still the positive space, and the white space is still the negative space. Yet, it's unbalanced, the positive and negative space. As a composition, this still works out fine. Last, let's look at this composition. Here we have, again, the tree and the ground as the positive space, and this huge white space that is the negative space, again, with an unbalanced composition. This is also okay. The imbalance of the positive and negative space actually helps create a different feeling or emotion, possibly lonely, or maybe even a calm feeling. Hopefully this overview has given you a better idea of what positive and negative spaces are. Now we're going to move on to an exercise. When you come to class next time, I want you to draw a stool by drawing only the negative space. Reminder, this is what you will be doing in class. So, here's a picture of a stool from our classroom. I'm going to carefully look for the negative spaces. As you can see, I'm now outlining one of the negative spaces in red. This long, skinny rectangle. I'm carefully trying to recreate that exact same shape on my sketch pad. Now, please make sure that as you are recreating this drawing in your sketchbook, that you make it really, really large so you fill up the whole page. Now I'm moving on to a tiny little negative space that I see below that rectangle. Next, I'm going to move on to the next negative space. Again, a long, skinny rectangle. I'm being very, very careful to make sure that my spacing between the rectangles is fairly accurate. I'm also being very careful to make sure that the lines that should be lined up are properly lined up. Whereas if you look at the top, those lines are not perfectly lined up. As I move on, I once again want to make sure that my spacing is good in between my negative space rectangles that I'm drawing. I'm also double checking the angle of the lines for the top and the bottom of my rectangles. The one on the top is very clearly lined up with the middle rectangle, whereas the one on the bottom has a different angle. It starts to angle down. Now to draw the last couple negative spaces that I see in between the legs of the stool. There's a small rectangle toward the bottom. I'm very carefully making sure that the proper lines of the rectangle are lined up with other lines in other areas. I'm also paying attention to my spacing in between my negative spaces, or my negative shapes. The spacing between these negative shapes is very important in order to keep a nice proportioned negative space drawing. Next, I'm going to move on to the outline of the legs. I want to pay close attention to the length of the legs, and I'm comparing it to my negative spaces up top so that I can get the length just right. I also want to make sure that I have the angles correct. That is, the angles that are connecting the legs to one another. My back leg comes down only a tiny bit. I need to be very careful of that. Notice I'm also being careful of the very, very bottom of the leg and the angles that go into making that. The leg I'm drawing now is the leg that is closest to me. So as you can see, it comes down just a little bit further than the first leg that I started to draw. I can also carefully take the rest of my outline all the way up toward the top of the stool. Once I get my fourth leg in, I can do the same on the left-hand side, double checking my angles and also double checking to make sure that all of the lines are lined up properly. My final leg comes down just a little bit further than my back leg. So as you can see, all of the legs come down to different areas on my paper. They are not lined up at all. I want to be very, very careful of this because this helps me to show the proper perspective of my stool. Lastly, I'm going to draw the top of the stool. The space at the top of the stool tends to be a little bit bigger than we often think it is, so please be aware of that. Yet the very, very top round part of the stool is quite thin. And oftentimes we can see the back of the stool, which makes it look like it's arching up ever so slightly. Lastly, I'm just going to double check with a ruler to make sure that all of the lines that should be lined up properly are lined up properly. This just helps once again with the proportions of my piece. Now I'm ready to color. Please take one color only and color in the negative spaces as nicely as possible.
So the action there where she's coloring in all the negative spaces, that's not something we're going to do, because if you follow the instructions on the negative space sheet, it asks you to put in a ground, which is basically just a layer of graphite smoothed in. And if you'll look on the negative space page on your canvas, it gives you instructions on how to do that. But otherwise, this is a really great example of how to do this assignment. You can use a chair, you can use a stool, and I like that she used the ruler there to finish it off. So that is your assignment, to do a negative space drawing of a stool or a chair. And once you are all done, make sure you fill out the quiz that is off to the right on your Canvas page under the table of contents on the negative space page. And good luck.